This show wasn't originally on my list of shows to cover, but I saw it on Netflix while perusing and it looked like fun. That, and I saw that Toni Collette was starring, so I figured I'd give it a shot. And I was pleasantly surprised by the first episode. In fact, there wasn't much narratively wrong with the show's pilot, other than maybe one scene I thought could have been a little longer and ended a little differently in the third act. And that gave me hope that I had found a sleeper, that the show, being that it only had 7 more episodes after the first, might be better than its audience scores on Tomatoes. But as the show got into the third act of its story overall, the cracks became more and more obvious, and the ending left a lot to be desired, in my opinion. I didn't like that the plot point involving Lila maybe having killed her sister was left open-ended. The show decided that essentially it didn't matter, but I think it explicitly pertained to who we viewed Lila as being in her totality, which I think in a story like this one, a story about mental health and healing, would have been of great narrative importance. The show inexplicably makes the same decision with Laura and the fate of her parents. We can assume that they're dead and even that they were killed, but by who? Again, I think it's very important given Evelyn's fate and where the show leaves off as it pertains to Alex and Laura's relationship and even their baby's overall safety. And that brings me to the things that we do know as it pertains to the fate of the 5 main characters in this story. Now, I didn't like Lila deciding to stay at Tall Pines. The story started off with Abby and Lila wanting to move to Vancouver and live off the grid together. And we learned a great deal about Lila and why she is the way that she is, but I didn't like all the back and forth. I mean, why have her leave the compound with Abby and Rory only to change her mind and decide to stay behind after they were already out, especially in the wake of Evelyn's death? And speaking of Evelyn's death, I was okay with it as I knew it was likely to happen from the very beginning, but I didn't like who did it. Alex seems far too broken, and his body count was just much too high in this show for me to leave him at the point that we did, thinking of him as a good person or even a safe person to raise a child with. Add to that fact that the show toys with us at the end, momentarily showing us the road not taken, wherein Alex kidnaps his and Laura's baby, and he and Abby drive away from Tall Pines together, but that's not the ending the writers ultimately decided on. Instead, Alex decided to stay with Laura, who at that point had become the new Evelyn, which was a nice twist, though I could have definitely seen it coming. Don't even get me started on that. But Alex ultimately decided to stay and raise a child in Tall Pines amongst all the people he vowed to get Laura and the baby away from since the story's early setup. Now, overall, I'd give this series a 70%, or a 7.0 if you're thinking IMDb score. Effectively, a C as a letter grade. Look, this series started off really good, but a lot of shows do, and I had high hopes for this story, again, despite the low scores on the aggregates. But once I got to the end of it, I realized a little bit better what people may have had issues with, as I was a bit perplexed by the choices that were made, essentially, especially in the final episode. And